The first problem. Negation A and negation B can be derived from the negation of A or B. This is one of the so-called De Morgan laws. Let us first think intuitively why negation A and negation B should follow from the negation of A or B. Say it is not true that it rains or snows. Why can we conclude that it neither rains nor snows? Well, because if it, for example, rained, then it would a fortiori rain or snow, so we would contradict the made assumption. We try to make this formal. But let us continue thinking intuitively why negation A and negation B should follow from the negation of A or B. Since we are proving a conjunction, we can take each conjunct separately. Let us look at not A. Assuming A gives A or B, contradicting immediately the assumption negation A or B. So we must conclude not A. Similarly, we get not B. So we start by writing down the assumption negation left parenthesis A or B right parenthesis, and by making the temporary assumption A in order to derive a contradiction and be able to derive not A. We get a contradiction immediately by using the disjunction introduction rule and then the conjunction introduction rule. And we can conclude not A and at the same time eliminate the temporary assumption A. We do the same for B, obtaining not B. An application of the conjunction introduction rule finishes the proof. Second problem. Negation A or negation B can be derived from negation left parenthesis A and B right parenthesis. Another example of the so-called De Morgan law. This is actually a more difficult derivation than the previous. We want to conclude not A or not B, so the temptation is to try to derive one of not A and not B. But which one? This kind of problem in logic, the problem of deriving a disjunction without seeing a way to derive either disjunct separately, is related to the difference between non-classical logic and classical logic. In this course, our logic is classical, so we use indirect inference. Let us first think intuitively why negation A or negation B should follow from negation left parenthesis A and B right parenthesis. Say, a dish does not contain both cream and meat. Why can we conclude that either cream is missing or meat is missing? Well, because if both cream and meat were there, we would contradict the made assumption. So one of cream and meat must be missing. We try to make this formal. Let us still think intuitively why not A or not B should follow from not left parenthesis A and B right parenthesis. Let us assume not A or not B is false, that is, negation left parenthesis negation A or negation B right parenthesis, and work towards a contradiction. Now clearly not A leads to a contradiction, so not A, that is A, is true. Respectively B is true. So A and B is true. This contradicts the assumption negation left parenthesis A and B right parenthesis. So we get negation, negation, left parenthesis, negation A or negation B, right parenthesis. That is negation A or negation B. To write down the derivation, we start by writing down the assumption not left parenthesis A and B, right parenthesis, and the denial, negation, left parenthesis, negation A or negation B, right parenthesis, of what we try to prove. Since we have denied our claim, we are using an indirect inference, and we try to derive a contradiction. We observe that if negation A is taken as a temporary assumption, we can derive not A or not B, which contradicts our assumption not left parenthesis, not A or not B, right parenthesis. So with the double negation trick, we can conclude A. Now we do the same for B. We have obtained A and B, so we can derive A and B, leading to a contradiction. The derivation is ready. A or not A is derivable. This is the so-called law of excluded middle. The intuition is that we use indirect proof. So we assume the negation of our claim, that is negation left parenthesis A or not A right parenthesis, and derive a contradiction. In this situation, A leads to A or not A and hence to a contradiction, because we have made a temporary assumption which is just a negation of A or not A. Thus we may conclude not A and eliminate the temporary assumption A. But this leads again to A or not A and hence to a contradiction, and we are done. So we start by writing down the main temporary assumption, namely the denial of the conclusion, that is negation left parenthesis A or not A right parenthesis. So from now on we try to reach a contradiction in order to be able to use the negation introduction rule and the negation elimination rule, and thereby reach the claim A or not A. Now we make a new temporary assumption A. From this we get immediately A or not A. But this is contrary to our first temporary assumption. So we get not A and can eliminate the temporary assumption A. But from negation A we can derive A or not A. Again a contradiction with our first and the only remaining temporary assumption. So we can again use the negation introduction rule to derive the negation of our only remaining temporary assumption. And the temporary assumption is now eliminated. So we get A or not A, and there are no remaining temporary assumptions, so we are done.